play a game of Would You Rather. So, would you rather A. Buy this sparkling brand new office building that's located right in the heart of a huge city? Or 2. Consider an older, slightly worn down shopping mall that's located in the suburbs instead? Now, before you decide, here's something to think about. Real estate investment trusts or REIT managers face these decisions almost every other day. And the right choice often depends on several factors that we as retail investors may not have considered. Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Bianca. And for those of you who have been following me all this while, yes, I am officially back to making videos. I'll put it this way, I am just glad that I am well and alive and simply living in recovery. So thank you everybody for your patience. Now moving forward, let's just focus on the brighter sides of life and get down to business. In today's video, we are going to uncover a bit more about how REIT managers evaluate properties. So turning what may seem to be a rather tricky decision into a meticulous process. And we're going to break this down into a few sections where we explore how REIT managers evaluate the property details, financial strategies, risk assessment, as well as how they could potentially unlock additional value from the investment. And by the end of this video, I hope that you will be able to gather some insights as to why sometimes, that older mall might actually be a smarter investment. But before we dive in, here's a quick caveat. Not all REIT managers evaluate properties the same way. Different REIT managers would have different investment criteria and risk tolerances depending on their strategy. A commercial REIT focusing on office buildings may have a very different viewpoint as opposed to a REIT that is focusing on data centers or perhaps logistics. So while we are going to break down some of the common practices, just always keep in mind that different REITs will have their own unique framework. Now, let's move to the first part, which involves assessing the property itself. REIT managers may typically begin by first analyzing the property's key characteristics as part of determining its suitability and potential value as part of their whole portfolio. This involves looking at the physical, functional, as well as legal attributes of the property. And that includes, number 1, the land area and tenure. The land area defines how much physical space the property occupies, and that in turn influences the revenue potential as well as the development potential of the property. However, size alone is definitely not enough because tenure is also a factor that comes into play. And you can break it down into two different types of tenure, both freehold and leasehold properties. Freehold properties grant permanent ownership, meaning to say that the land and any building on top of it would belong to the owner indefinitely. And this is why freehold properties are so highly desirable and valuable. Leasehold properties, in contrast, are owned for a fixed period of time under a lease agreement with the landowner, which could be anyone like the government, a private entity, or an individual. Once the lease expires, the ownership of the land and property typically reverts to the original landowner unless the lease has been extended. That said, leasehold properties can still be attractive investments if there's significant amount of time left on the lease or if the terms of renewal remains favorable. Moving forward, REIT managers may also need to evaluate the land title. Now, the land title is an official document that confirms both ownership and what the property can be legally used for. So, a property with a clear title means that there aren't any legal disputes or complications associated with its ownership. On the flip side, there are properties that have encumbered titles, meaning to say that there are claims, restrictions, or even liabilities attached to its ownership. And they could be things such as unpaid taxes, mortgages, or even serious legal disputes. Next in line, we also have land use and zoning. Land use basically dictates how a property can legally function, such as for commercial, residential, or agricultural purposes. Meanwhile, zoning ensures compliance with local regulations. For example, a REIT focusing on retail properties wouldn't actually benefit from buying a property that's located in a residential zone because it ultimately limits its income generation as well as redevelopment potential. Next, REIT managers will also need to study two factors called the gross floor area or GFA or the NLA, which is essentially the net lettable area. Now, the gross floor area or GFA refers to the total built-up area of the building, and that includes literally everything including the stairwells, hallways, or even the mechanical rooms. The net lettable area or NLA, on the other hand, are essentially portions of the property that can be rented out to the tenants. So this would include usable spaces such as the office spaces, retail lots, or apartments. Now, from a REIT manager's perspective, it would be important for us to study the NLA to GFA ratio. Essentially, this ratio is crucial because it shows how efficiently a property is at converting its size into revenue-generating space, aka rent. And a higher ratio would mean that more of the property is working to generate the rental income. And REIT managers love rental income. Now, let's move on to occupancy rates, which reviews how much of the property is currently leased. Naturally, a higher occupancy rate may indicate a stable and more predictable rental income, while a lower occupancy rate will suggest that there are some room for improvement. So, once the property itself has been assessed, it is fairly natural for REIT managers to then dive into the financial aspects to determine if this investment makes sense. It's kind of similar to investing in companies because you need to look at the cost, revenue, as well as profitability metrics. Well, first things first, whenever you buy something, you do need to know the asking price, or in other words, the seller's quoted price for the property. Other than that, the REIT managers will also need to account for the investment costs, which includes anything ranging from the due diligence expenses, legal fees, or any other expenses that relates to buying the property. All those added costs plus the asking price will then give you the overall actual financial commitment for the investment. And just bear in mind that all of these are super crucial if you want to make sure that a deal that looks good on paper does not end up to become an overinvestment. Other than that, as how I mentioned earlier, REIT managers will also need to look into the revenue potential. This may include studying the property's current rental rates to make sure that they remain competitive with the general market. If the rates are too low, well, that shows that there may be room to increase them and therefore more rental income. On the other hand, if the current rental rates are just way too high, there's always this risk of the property losing its tenants, and therefore it may impact the long-term revenue potential. Moving on, we will also need to study the operating costs of running and maintaining the property. So these operating costs could include things such as your utility bills, property management fees, pest control, cleaning, so on and so forth. Given that high operating costs would naturally eat into profitability, it would be pretty expected for REIT managers to prefer properties with a much more manageable operating costs. And then subtracting all these operating expenses from the gross revenue earlier would then give you what we call as the net property income or NPI. This would then link us very swiftly into the next bit that REIT managers will need to study, which is the initial NPI or net property income yield. So NPI is a key figure that shows how much profit the property is generating. This then leads us to the initial NPI yield, which measures the property's profitability relative to the total investment cost that I shared earlier, which is the asking price plus all the additional investment costs. This metric in turn would then enable REIT managers to compare different properties directly and determine which of these properties offer the highest potential returns. Now, after crunching all the numbers and looking into the financial viability of the investment, REIT managers would then turn their heads towards managing the risks. Basically, this step is all about trying to figure out what could go wrong in the whole acquisition process as well as the property itself, and then figuring out how to make sure that this property aligns with the REIT's long-term investment goals. And one of the factors that you could look into would be the economic and market condition. Well, put it this way, a property's success would be tied to the surrounding markets. And that means REIT managers will need to analyze the local demands, competitions, as well as economic trends to gauge the potential of the property as well as the risk involved. So to give a very straightforward example, a shopping mall located in a very vibrant, affluent area that's densely populated would naturally have a lot more long-term profitability potential as opposed to one that's located in a region that is facing economic decline. Or let's just say the shopping mall is located in an area that is filled with many other shopping malls. This could in turn put a lot of pressure onto the rental rates and of course the long-term profitability. So understanding this dynamics would be imperative if REIT managers want to minimize exposure to fluctuating market demands. Besides that, well, sustainability as well as ESG or environmental, social and governance considerations are increasingly crucial in modern property investments. And from what I've seen at work, properties with more energy efficient designs, renewable energy systems, or green building certifications would not only lower the operating costs of running the property, but also attract tenants who are willing to pay a premium for these eco-friendly designs. On top of that, ESG compliance would also mean that the REIT becomes much more attractive / marketable to socially responsible investors, whether it is retail or institutional. Moving on, the seller's reputation and credibility is also a critical factor to be assessed during the risk assessment process. In simple words, well, everyone will want a trustworthy seller to make sure that transparency is present in every single aspect of the transaction process. Hence, sellers with a strong track record of efficient and ethical dealings would essentially streamline the entire due diligence process and make life easier for everybody. And I'll put it this way, if the REIT managers have greater confidence in their investment, they would be able to sleep better at night. Conversely, an unreliable seller is probably going to introduce a lot of unnecessary issues, whether it is delays or even legal complications during the acquisition timeline. And finally, well, once the REIT managers have evaluated the property's characteristics, financial profile, as well as risk, it's fairly natural to start thinking about the potential for value enhancement. And this can be a fun step because this is where you can be a bit more creative and start brainstorming as to how you could deliver a higher value from this property through some targeted strategies. And this brings me to a term that you will probably come across a lot in many REIT annual reports, and that term is called AEI, or Asset Enhancement Initiative. So the term AEI is essentially a fancy term to say opportunities that you could adopt to upgrade or perhaps improve the property as part of boosting its appeal and earning potential. Let's just say we have a really old office building with an extremely outdated layout in our portfolio. Well, an AEI could basically be redesigning the common area or introducing some modern facilities or perhaps some tenant-friendly amenities. These enhancements may in turn attract premium tenants, increase the occupancy rates, and eventually make the property much more competitive in the market. Meanwhile, REIT managers could also look into cost optimization opportunities as well. And this can come from many angles, whether it is implementing more energy efficient solutions or perhaps renegotiating your supplier contracts. And in some cases, REIT managers could also assess whether repositioning the property could better align with the current market demands. So let's just say we take office buildings as an example again. Well, there is always a possibility for you to convert that office building into co-working space or even residential units or even a full-fledged hotel if that's what the population in that region wants. And if done correctly, repositioning can transform an underutilized property into a high-demand asset and essentially unlocking entirely new revenue streams. So there you have it, a rough idea of how REIT managers may approach property acquisitions. Ultimately, I hope that you can now understand that the process isn't about finding the flashiest property out there in the market. Rather, it is about figuring out which property aligns best with the REIT strategy as well as offer the most long-term returns. So now, if you were to think about the first question that I posed to you at the beginning of this video, this is the reason why sometimes the older mall may outshine that sleek office building in the middle of the city. And with that, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. If you enjoyed the breakdown, please help me by hitting the like, subscribe and bell icon. In the meantime, if you're new to the whole concept of REIT investing and need a rough understanding of the 10 key terms that every REIT investor needs to know and understand, well, do check out a video I've made earlier to cover you through that. Till then, I wish all of you an excellent day ahead. Stay healthy, stay well, stay kind, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye bye!